as we expected. As you know, we were originally scheduled to meet on Wednesday, February 24th, but given the cold weather events the prior week, the ERCOT board opted to hold an urgent meeting that same day, and we in turn canceled our own meeting for that date. The intention is to go ahead and pick up normal business that was to have occurred at that time and go ahead and pick that up again at our March 24th meeting. So for today's meeting, the goal is really to take the opportunity to start identifying and cataloging the issues that need improvement in our market. We're not targeting any sort of solutions today. We really just want to sit down, kind of come up with a potential list of items to look at that we may have the authority to fix, and maybe catalog other items that are beyond our control, but certainly something that folks want to keep track of. We did task each of the subcommittees this week to start developing that list of issues, and I certainly want to commend each of the subcommittees and the subcommittee leadership members for the planning and efforts that they undertook to lay the groundwork for today's discussion. Those items that they identified are listed under the meeting materials for today's meeting. In addition to those items that the subcommittees are bringing forth, ERCOT provided a list of issues, so we'll review those as well. And of course, we're always open to hearing any other ideas that the PAC members may have. I did want to caution us, first of all, that we definitely want to limit our discussions in this body to just those issues that we have control over, and let kind of the bigger policy decisions lie where they need to. So either at the commission or the legislature, we certainly don't want to get ahead of them with our discussions today. I think the intent today in talking with Eric and with ERCOT staff, I think what we'd like to do is once we've kind of cataloged the issues today and identified them, ERCOT staff, Eric and I will circle up and we'll compile a master list and start categorizing them for consideration at the next TAC meeting on March 24th. Once we have that together, we'll determine at that next TAC meeting how we want to parcel those individual items out. And there's certainly some overlap between the issues that have been identified by the subcommittees. We want to make sure those are directed in the right areas where they need to go. Once TAC is happy with that at the end of March, at the next meeting, I think what we'll go ahead and do at that time is go ahead and direct our subcommittees to begin working on those issues. In terms of process, I don't know if anybody has any questions on that or thoughts on the process. I see Bob's in the queue. Bob, I'll go ahead and call on you first.
Yeah, actually, Cliff, that's exactly what I was thinking is, what I think, and I think you're alluding to, is setting up a a spreadsheet of actions that need to be taken, what they are, who that's assigned to, the decision made, which, that may be agree, disagree, or out of our control, and then we report that back up. So I think that's where you're alluding. So I think that's a good tack to be taking.
Thanks, Bob, and you accurately captured that. That's exactly what we're looking to do. So probably better conveyed than I did. So, but yeah, I think I appreciate the help in clarifying that. Any other questions on, go ahead, Clayton.
Well, I think we're not getting into solutions, right? We're just acknowledging the different issues that may be out there. That's the spreadsheet, right? We're going to get a list of issues, and then we're going to flesh those out.
Yes,
and then,
that's exactly right.
Resolution for things that we have authority to do that on.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions in terms of process today? Okay, then. So we'll start, if you don't mind, Susie, can you pull up, I'm sorry, I'm assuming it's Susie driving. So if you don't mind, can you pull up the letter from Bill Magnus to the TAC, if you would? And we'll start with that. So this letter was provided to TAC members here earlier this week, and so many of you have probably had the opportunity to review it. What I'd like to do, if we can slide down a little further to the list of bullet points there, ERCOT did identify an initial priority list of 8 different items. And so we'll step through these, and I think they've got some very good ideas here, and I think these are, definitely items that we need to put on our list as we start concatenating, the list of items that have been identified by the subcommittees and by other folks. So I certainly see these as making them on the list here. The first one, item number 1 there, deals with coordination with transmission operators and DSPs as it relates to rotating load shed practices. So I know we certainly saw some load shed amounts that were far beyond anything we've seen historically. It certainly caused some challenges for wires providers, and so I think what we'd really like to see here is that you know, we come up with some solutions tailored to kind of the challenges that we had seen during this event. Bullet point number 2 there, you know, one thing that's been obviously hammered upon through some of the legislative hearings and so forth is public safety communications. You know, it's certainly something that I think a lot of us recognize may not have occurred as well as it should have during this event, and as such, you know, we need to kind of come up with a public safety communication strategy to make sure that all folks are available to make sure all folks are able to receive these types of communication. Clayton, did you want me to pick you up now, or did you want to wait to the end?
Well, I just didn't know if we were going to go through all of the lists and start assigning after that. Is that kind of what your plan is?
No, I think, Clayton, what I'd like to do is just go through these right now, and then after we've created that list today or identified that list of issues, I think just for the sake of expediency and efficiency, I think, you know, ERCOT staff, Eric and I will maybe make a first crack at it, and then we can go ahead and make that determination at the next TAC meeting at the end of March.
Okay, thanks.
Item number 3, identified by ERCOT, is increasing coordination with the Texas Energy Reliability Council and the Gas Electric Working Group. We obviously saw some challenges relating to critical gas facilities and disconnections that occurred during the rolling outages. Item number 4 has to relate to resource adequacy reporting, not only through our SARA, but potentially through the CER and so forth, and trying to come up with a greater range of potential risks for extreme weather events. Item number 5 has to do with reporting and timing requirement changes to the outage scheduler. I think there's a gap there in terms of ERCOT operations folks and operations support folks being able to see some of the actual outages as they occur and closer to real time. And so it appears there were some challenges there that maybe we need to be able to address through the ERCOT outage scheduler process. Telemetry information related to PRC, that is the available operating reserves in real time. So it looks like we've got some areas that we can work upon there. Registration of real-time data requirements for particularly DGRs or distribution level connected resources to enhance situational awareness for planning and operational purposes as we get into these types of events. And Susie, if you don't mind scrolling down a little more, there we go. And then finally, you know, a comprehensive evaluation of settlement and credit worthiness requirements, as obviously we've seen some pretty significant challenges in that area as we've gotten to the end of the actual event. So those are the issues that ERCOT's identified. We will definitely have those on our list of things to consider. I think some well thought out priorities there. And, you know, to the extent that ERCOT has some additional ideas, I think we're certainly open to, you know, addressing those as well. So, you know, hopefully as they identify those, they're able to bring those forward to us as well. Any questions in particular on the document sent over to us by Bill Magnus? Okay, sounds great then. So I think what we'll do for a next step, if we don't mind, is that we'll start.
Hey, Cliff?
Yes, go ahead. I'm sorry, Clayton.
Sorry, I was late on the draw there. Is it okay for the work groups to take these up as they see fit in the meantime, waiting for the assignment? Or do you want them to wait and not discuss it until the formal assignment is made?
So my original...
Like the last one is obviously... I'm sorry,
Go ahead.
8 is obviously market credit working group, right?
Exactly. So I think so, and I think credit working group of the board, I think obviously has some input or some latitude to do as they may on that front as well. But I think originally we were hoping to maybe I think originally what we had envisioned was that the working groups continue to work on the items that have already been assigned to them, but to hold off on doing anything pertaining to the list of issues that we identify here until TAX had some time to consider them and to provide some guidance to the subcommittees. So I think that's the preference, but to the extent that TAC believes otherwise, I think, we're certainly open from a TAC leadership perspective to looking at other ideas.
I would just hate to delay any progress that could be made between now and next month, if we could. Not to say that, I mean, we've already had WMS and ROS. They're not meeting it until after the next TAC meeting anyway, so that's fine. And that'd probably be the bulk of the assignments, but anyway, it's fine.
Okay. Thanks, Clayton. I don't want to stifle the discussions, particularly for things that are highly impactful, things that we probably need to solve sooner rather than later. So I know obviously settlement and credit worthiness is probably obviously on the forefront of the minds of a lot of folks right now. So from my perspective, I think that's certainly a very immediate need. Maybe some of these other items, maybe we can hold off on addressing those in the working groups and so forth. But I certainly can understand the level of concern, particularly as it relates to market fidelity there, and I can certainly see that moving forward. So I think otherwise, I would probably prefer that the rest of the working groups hold off until the TAC has kind of prioritized these and has provided guidance to the subcommittees. Does anybody have any objection to that approach? Okay, sounds great. All right. Well, that being said, I think what we'd like to go ahead and do is move into the list of issues identified by each of the different working groups, or rather subcommittees. So I think what I'd like to do is start with the RMS update to the TAC. Jim, are you there?
I am here, Cliff.
Okay, it's all yours.
All right. Thanks for the lead in. I do want to say thanks to Cliff and Eric for y'all's support and guidance through this effort. I think we had a lot of communication back and forth, and y'all's availability on our subcommittee call on Tuesday was very much appreciated to help kind of frame the discussion and guide us through this. So thank you to TAC leadership. And what we did review from the RMS perspective, the 8 bullet points that you just went over, recognizing that those really maybe not necessarily pertain exactly one for one to RMS on the retail side. So we actually try to focus more on the retail impacts from our segment and what we thought could have been improved as we were going through just the winter storm and then some of the events that followed after it. So you'll see that a lot of the bullet points are revolving around communications. What we did notice was a kind of a perfect storm of some failure of communications as far as the main conduit that we use on the retail side to communicate between CRs, TDUs, and even ERCOT. So the first one on the list is the communications to market participants. The ERCOT listserv was down for much of the event. There was an outage starting, I think, on Saturday night all the way through Wednesday night, and the listservs were our primary way of communicating amongst market participants. And with that being down, well, we didn't have a clear sight on when it would be back up, and so there were discussions about the ERCOT listserv, the SLA language for resolving off-hour or after-hour issues, as well as the review of limitations for retailers and load-serving entities to communicate to customers the latest status of the outages or communications coming from ERCOT. And so that was more of a lead in to larger communications from market participants. We moved then down to specific communications. I know that bullet point number 2, the types of communications from TDUs. This topic, realizing that it was mostly focused between communication between segments of market participants. We wanted to identify this. I don't believe that we can address this from a ERCOT perspective, because a lot of these are specific asks for TDUs. But I will just mention there's 5 communication topics that were pointed out, whether it's the TDU outage websites, the outage alerts that are pushed out from the TDU side to the end use customers. There was a desire for consistency in the delivery and content of the messaging within those communications from the TDUs, as well as the timeliness of this messaging. And then lastly, each of the TDUs has a competitor retailer information portal, and there's a slight edit for this bullet point E, where it's not to leverage the TDU crypt sites for customer communication, but for ERCOT communications to the CRs in the event that the listservs go down again in future instances. So from an RMS perspective, we are taking number 2 up kind of offline, not necessarily through the ERCOT stakeholder process. Moving to bullet point 3, there are types of communications from ERCOT that there was opinions that perhaps the modifications to the ERCOT corporate communication handbooks, where there's broadcast messages, to possibly include information disseminating to RMS. There was a perceived gap there that could have been helpful in the when we were in, I guess, in the middle of all of the events that were going on that week. There was also an ERCOT FAQs that were distributed. The feedback was that those are excellent, but the market, the retail side could benefit from a more timely dissemination of that information. And also, when it comes to the ERCOT summer preparedness communications, to possibly consider including winter preparedness now going forward, since we're starting to see a little bit more on the winter side. I see Clayton, you have a question.
Yeah,
I can pause. Yeah.
It looks like you're wanting to use the RMS as kind of the central clearinghouse for getting information out of ERCOT. Is that correct?
Yeah, on the retail side, that is what we leverage most of the time. Whether moratorium notices or others, we use the ERCOT listservs. We don't necessarily have to use the RMS listserv, but yes, the listservs were all down, and so
right,
our standard method of communication, sending out and receiving, just wasn't there. We're kind of dead in the water. So the TDUs had to pivot to another method. Basically, we had to go offline and use our rep contacts that we've kind of gathered ourselves and send out broadcast messages that way. So it was kind of clunky not having the standard method.
So you built your own list, basically.
Correct. We all each had to basically use our own list. And again, that's not standard. We kind of had to duct tape and chicken wire that together. But we've used that process already in other instances. It just, for this one, we were kind of blindsided with the listservs being down.
Yeah, right. And what I'm wondering, with the recommendation being to the RMS listserv, are all retailers that are registered in ERCOT on that listserv, or can we? I'm wondering if we need just a push retailer listserv, that if you're registered with ERCOT, you're on this listserv, and then specific information goes out on that.
Yeah, I mean, we're going into the solutioning piece, but yes, that would make sense. Or if that we don't need to go down that road, then we can at least have some surety that there is some after-hour support that can bring back the listservs if they happen to go down. What we were told was there was not any after-hour support, and we did not get notice of their listserv errors or issues, kind of through the whole outage event, and even when it came back up on Wednesday at 7 p.m. I guess we all experienced a bombardment of all of the market notices that were queued up, kind of being released all at one time.
Yeah,
and so
that was a pretty interesting experience to go through. Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. Sorry to get into the solution side. I got to stop doing that.
No,
thank you.
No problem, Clayton. I see Emily. Did you have a comment?
I did have a question. Can you hear me, Jim?
I sure can.
I wanted to apologize if this was covered already or at RMS, but I did have a question around the cause of the listserv issue, and if that itself is something that we need to address going forward. Because obviously the timeliness of that was extremely unfortunate, the timing of that rather.
Yeah. Well, Emily, we did not discuss root cause or what actually happened and what was needed to fix it. I think that's part of the entire evaluation of the listserv piece. Being that we were kind of just trying to make everything work with what we were given, didn't have too much time to go back and ask for a root cause analysis and things to do better. But I expect that to be part of the post-action report, if you will, to figure out what happened there and what can be improved to where next time, if there is a listserv outage, that there is a communication out to the market that the listservs are down, an explanation of root cause analysis, and possibly even an ETA of when we would be restored. Because this entire time, we were never informed officially when it was down, nor were we informed when it came back up. And so there was a lot of confusion that went on in that part.
Yes, absolutely. And perhaps we could add to that analysis whether there's a backup form of communication should the listservs be unavailable again.
That is correct. That's what we're hoping as well, which led into the second bullet point from the types of communications from TDUs, because it ended up having to pivot over to the TDUs using the resources that we had on hand to get the messaging and communications out to the retailers. I see, Kanan, you're also in the queue. You can go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
So I just want to make, I guess, 2 points. The first is definitely, based on y'all's conversation, I would encourage this to be on a list somewhere. And the other thing I would just say is that ERCOT doesn't run the listserv, it's a vendor. Just want to make sure everybody knew that. But I think it's important to get this item documented if it's not.
Thanks for that clarification, Kanan. I was not aware that it resided in a vendor, but that helps, and perhaps that's part of the evaluation that's needed to maybe shore up that after-hours support or emergency support if needed. But thank you. Oh, okay. I also see another comment in the queue from Basau. I'm sorry if I butchered that. Did you have a comment you would like to share with the group?
Yes, this is Victor Sowers from Tico Energy Capital. How are you and everyone else?
Good, thanks.
Looking at the document, and I thought it was very well done as what we're seeing. And so we look at thousands and thousands of meters of oil and gas. So you can well imagine when we saw shedding load and we couldn't turn on the wells because they were frozen, right? Not mentioning compressors and gas plants to feed the power plants. So you can well imagine the multiple effect during a dropping of hertz, an emergency situation. On top of dealing that, we also look at water, and we had the same scenario when we worked with San Diego in 2011, funny, same year as ERCOT first large cold event, where from San Diego all the way down south, we lost power. And lo and behold, we had water for 8 hours. So the thinking is between our cities in Texas, what is the gigawatt that's available for rolling, controlled rolling outages with this gigawatt availability when our water pressure to the customer, the spigot, is good for 3 to 8 hours. So it's just something to think about by our Texas assets when we say, what can we do that might require a little more granularity with our control of the industrial assets. Situational awareness that if we cut power, we make the situation worse, where weatherization would not have worked. But it is necessary. But we look at that saying, you know, versus cutting at the distribution wire, and within municipality, we lose 2,500 residential customers and any other C&I downstream from there. Be nice to say that, you know, we're looking at architecture that, you know, I can't control my three-phase wire. Clearly, we look at reclosures and things of that nature, but is that communicated to the distribution? Is that communicated to ERCOT where we can be a little more elegant in our use of shredding power? At the same token, protecting citizens who are on oxygen per se, or some other medical need. It's just something to think about by just doing an overview of what kind of assets do we have that have capability, like our water pumping infrastructure in the state of Texas, that's a gigawatt of pumping power, and as an example. But anyway, those are just my 2 cents. I appreciate y'all's time.
Thanks for those comments. I believe as Clayton's, I'll go ahead and call on Clayton. Then I think he had a response to your comments.
Jim, I'm going to jump in. This is Cliff. So I think, and I think that's where Clayton's going too. I think what you're proposing there is more in the realm of ROS, and to a certain extent, some of what I'm hearing maybe even outside the realm of what the stakeholder body at ERCOT can do. But I certainly think it's something that we can certainly put on the list, and you know, as something that we need to review or at least capture as an item, regardless of whether the stakeholder process at ERCOT can address it. And I tell you what might work a little bit better, and I'm open to the will of the group, but, you know, to the extent that we can, maybe what we do is let the presenter go through their bullet points, and then to the extent that your issue is not captured, maybe we go ahead and take questions at the end of each presenter, just to kind of facilitate expediency and efficiency. Okay, Jim, it's yours.
I could definitely do that, Cliff. Thanks. Sorry for that. Calling questions out of order. Okay, so let me get through number 3. So okay, we touched on 3C, where the summer preparedness communications may benefit from including winter preparedness. Moving on to number 4, meter data expectations. This as well may not fully reside just squarely in the ERCOT retail realm. There were some out of market actions, I will call it, from from other regulating entities that change some of the meter data expectations. But there was a statement issued to where, they would like to evaluate the establishment of standardized expectations regarding the meter data and estimates during customer outages, as well as possibly treating the commercial industrial customers, having those taken into consideration as well when it comes to estimates during outage. And so again, that has teeth in other arenas, but we wanted to make sure this was captured, recognizing that it may not be fully resolved at ERCOT. Moving to number 5, defaults, acquisitions, and uplift clarifications. Again, this touches back onto end-use customer communications on what happens when a rep defaults, causing a mass transition, how that differs from an acquisition transfer when reps transfer part or all of their book to another rep, as well as what happens as uplift occurs due to rep default. And so I think that goes back to possibly a end-use customer education, but also helping communicate what all those pieces are, how they work, and what that means possibly as refunds to customers. And so bullet point B under 5 touches on some of the default acquisition, as do C and D. Moving on to number 6, there was a statement made where the ERCOT website display was not as clear as some were hoping. The supply and demand chart was not helpful because it was not as accurate as some believed it should be, and the current system conditions of forecasts were not clear as well. So that is perhaps something that we could influence here, but again, we can but Cliff and Eric can decide if that needs to go onto the list and how that needs to be worded. And then lastly, from RMS, we came with number 7. It was the winter weather preparations. This is something that RMS believes that we can have influence over. Typically, in the March-April timeframe, we have workshops that go over retail summer preparedness. That includes mass transition workshops, overview of roles and responsibilities for mass transitions. The thought is that RMS could probably benefit from having not just one time a year discussions on that, but have twice a year to cover both summer and winter. So that was the extent of the RMS discussion, and I think I'll go ahead and stop here and open it up for any other questions, or Cliff, if you'd like to move forward from us.
Okay, sounds good. So, Jim, I think RMS has brought forward a pretty good list here. I think there's lots of good things to talk about here, and definitely appreciate that. I guess we'll open it up to TAC. Is there any questions or comments to any of the items that Jim brought forth? Okay, hearing none. Jim, definitely appreciate that very much. If we would, Susie, I believe next is WMS, right? I'm sorry, ROS. Let's bring up the ROS. Chase, are you going to be doing that today?
I am, Cliff. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now, Chase. Go ahead. It's all yours.
Great. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Chase Smith, ROS Chair. First, I want to echo what Jim said, that Katie and I have appreciated, Cliff, you and Eric being available and giving both direction and helping and guidance as we've kind of navigated the past 2 weeks leading up to ROS yesterday and then heading into this meeting. That's been very helpful. I was not planning to go through every single bullet on this list. I was going to describe the process of how we got there, how we laid out this document, and then probably highlight a few of the points on here, and then can obviously take questions and we can dive deeper into any one issue as that is needed. Cliff, would you like me to go through, like you said, or do you want to stop and do questions?
No, let's, if you don't mind, let's go ahead, and if you want to cover your talking points, and then we'll go ahead and take questions when you're done.
Okay, great. So ROS, we solicited feedback via the ROS listserv, just asking for stakeholder comments on trying to identify issues within the purview of ROS. We got a lot of, we got multiple comments that were helpful, and based on that, we put together this list of ROS-related items. And I want to acknowledge that I think there is duplication on here, both in, there are some items that are listed here in this first bucket that we think are probably more of a broader market issue, or you know, a legislature or PUCT may weigh in on certain things that we are given direction at some point in the future, and or also are potential issues that maybe aren't specific to ROS. I also think that we probably have some duplication in here that, for example, RESME may have put in on the WMS list as well. And we will definitely be looking to feedback from TAC on what is the right way to assign the issues amongst the different subcommittees and working groups. But we at least wanted to start, this was kind of a first step in trying to identify issues. And we hope that it will be helpful in comparing all three of the subcommittees' documents and consolidating and crossing some things off that and figuring out if we need to reorganize how we're assigning those issues. But we have the first bucket is high-level issues not specific to ROS. The big thing there I'll say is the first sub-bullet, just this overall assessment and root cause analysis. And the feedback that I received on that was having an independent third party do that. There's a lot of other huge things on here that I won't dive into all those details right now. If you scroll down, Susie, the next major buckets, how we tried to organize this, and we are looking for feedback if we think there's maybe a better way to try and categorize the different issues, is we kind of had a general items that maybe don't fit perfectly into a category, and then 3 different items where you have one's related to load, one related to generation, and one related to transmission. So I will say if you scroll down, Susie, on the load related items, I did want to bring up what I personally think is very high priority, and based on the feedback we received from ERCOT and Bill Magnus and the list that he sent out, is just general looking into load shed practices and understanding challenges and what went wrong in that regard, and figuring out what to do next as far as making improvements in things to make us better prepared for an emergency event in the future. A lot of feedback on general under frequency on the morning of February 15th, and wanting to do a deeper dive into that time period leading up to when the load shed started to be instructed. Reviewing trigger points on under frequency for both load and generation, and making sure those are aligned. And then if you scroll down, Susie, there's a lot of different things in the generation bucket. Outage, making sure the outage scheduler is being reported on in a timely and accurate manner, reviewing the winter weatherization practices, lots of other things. I will say you'll see that there's a star behind a couple of those comments, those items, Cliff. We added a couple, or I think there's 3 or 4 we added from the list that Bill Magnus sent to TAC that we put into this document. That doesn't mean that is for sure exactly needs to be only ROS that looks at it, and we definitely want feedback to understand if maybe it's more of something that should go to WMS, or potentially, there's parallel review of an issue between the different subcommittees. So I wanted to point that out. And then if you keep scrolling down, Susie, there's comments on just an overall review of if we have the right ancillary service products. And finally, I guess I'll move to the transmission, the 2 transmission items we had notes on. Just an overall review of transmission planning processes, determining if any adjustments are warranted. And then also there were multiple questions and comments on potential generation trapped behind GTCs during the event, understanding that better and looking into potential, just reviewing that whole process and understanding that, and if changes are warranted around GTC management during emergency grid conditions. So, Cliff, I think that covers most of the things I wanted to discuss. I think, yeah, that really covers it. So I see there's a few people in the queue, and I'll hand it back over to you, Cliff, to see if you have any comments or questions, or if we can go to Clayton.
Okay. No, that sounds great, Chase. And again, some good work on the part of ROS in pulling this together. I think a lot of good items in here for us to look at and parse out and talk about as things move forward. We'll go through the queue now. So Clayton, you're up.
Yeah, in I think it was item D in your general. The ERS program, do we have an idea if any of the compressor stations or gas processing plants were in the ERS program and were tripped off during this event due to their participation in that program? And then I also have the same question for any load resources that were selling responsive reserve as ancillary services during that time. Do we have a good feel for if any of those involved compressor stations or gas processing plants?
I'm going to have to defer. Go ahead.
I was just going to say real quick, Cliff, that I personally don't know the answers to those questions yet, Clayton. But I think they're good questions that we need to dive into deeper. I don't have an answer right now. And Cliff, I'm sorry if I just cut you off if you were going to say something.
No. Yeah, I was looking to see if anybody from maybe ERCOT had an answer to that. I see Kanan, I see you're in the queue. I don't know if you were in the queue to answer that specifically, or if you had another comment.
I was in the queue to answer that. I don't have that information, but that is something we would be willing to, in aggregate form, put together and support the request if that's on the list.
Yeah, I think, Kanan, if we can, I know that some of those guys were not declared as critical loads prior to the event, and some of them got registered during the event. And I think that we're going to see a lot of improvement based on that. But is there a prohibition for critical loads like that, people that are on the critical load list, being allowed to participate in the ERS and LR programs?
I would want to validate that. I believe there is, but I want to be absolutely sure before I answer that.
Okay, thank you. And I'm not sure whether this is better for ROS or WMS, or if it's just a general ERCOT assignment, but it seems like something that we should know.
Yeah, I mean, I think the key thing is if we can get this in one place instead of two, it's easier, but I believe we need to follow up with you on your questions.
Okay, and then on the low set under frequency relays on the feeders, do we know if any of those were already tripped off during the event?
Again, I'd like to assign that kind of thing and report it all out at once rather than try and scramble and get that to you. But we're happy to support those requests.
No, that's perfectly fair, and I really appreciate the job you guys did. I think one of the things that's been underappreciated in all this is, you know, what you guys saved us from. I don't think everybody fully comprehends the catastrophe that would have been if we'd had a full black start event. I mean, we had, you know, a lot of human tragedy with the event as it was, but that would have been exponentially worse had we gone into blackout. So I really appreciate the guys the job that you guys did during that whole thing. Thanks.
Thanks, Clayton.
Okay, looks like we have Mike Wise next.
Oh, thanks, Mr. Chair. Yeah, first of all, I'd like to agree with what Clayton said, his final comments. We'll pass the word on. You guys did just a superb job of keeping this from going into blackout. I don't know more detail, but all of us appreciate significantly that. Chase, thanks again for good review. My question is on load related items of ROS. Looking at 3B, the load shed table. It might be embedded in here, but I don't see it explicitly stated, so I'm concerned. And that's the review of the load shed table. Can we consider that the matrix is developed on summertime loads, and this is a wintertime load shed? You have some particularly strange unintended consequences, I believe. Let me give you an example. I have one cooperative in a member of mine in ERCOT that was asked to curtail more load than he ever had in the wintertime. He couldn't meet his load shed requirement because the matrix is based off a summertime load ratio share. And so he had to actually turn off all load in ERCOT, and it didn't even get close to meeting his requirement. So can we add something into that to review a matrix for seasonal load shed responsibilities?
Yeah, Mike, I think that's a fair. This is Cliff. I think that's a fair question to add. I have it down here, so trying to capture these as they come up. So yes, I think we can definitely get that added.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. This is Chase. Thank you, Mike. I think that's a great recommendation. We'll add that to the list, as Cliff said.
Okay, Reshni, you're up next.
I just wanted to point out that the issue that Clayton raised earlier about the ERS is one of the items in the WMS list, so it's captured.
Okay,
and I would think that DSWG would be looking at the performance and the data as part of evaluation of the winter event.
Very good. Okay, yeah, thanks for pointing that out, Reshni. I'd forgotten that it was in the WMS list. So yeah, thank you very much for pointing that out to me.
No problem.
Hey, Cliff, this is Chase.
Chase.
Can I just say one thing? And thank you, Resmi. I think another piece of feedback that would be helpful for us looking at ROS issues is I think that it probably makes sense sometimes on an issue that's clearly an ROS item, or it's clearly a WMS item or an RMS item. I'm also thinking in my head that maybe sometimes there's a topic where one of the subcommittees wants to look at it through a particular lens and another one does through another. And as an example, we were just talking about ERS. My initial thoughts was that ROS wants to know, just in general, how the ERS resources performed and their availability. But I think clearly WMS has a lot to look at there too, just overall the program and thinking through different things on that. So just wanted to add that's also some, I think, would be helpful to get just for us to coordinate on. Thank you.
Yeah, Chase, this is Cliff, and I agree with that. What I would envision is I imagine where those areas where we have some overlap, I could imagine specifically this one, maybe we have DSWG and OWG maybe jointly look at it. We may end up having to have some joint meetings with some of the working groups and so forth to look at it. So I think we're definitely going to need to be nimble in that regard as we, start parsing these out and make sure that we're not tripping over each other in addressing them or whatever. So to the extent that we need to do so, I think we're very wise to do so, and I would encourage that by each of the working groups and subcommittees. Looks like Kevin, go ahead, Rashmi, I'm sorry.
I just saw the list item by Kevin. That is also in the WMS list in some form.
Sounds great. Kevin, did you want to speak to that any?
Sure. Yeah. Ross, listen, it's possible I might be missing it, that it's in there already, but breaking out specifically that discussion around the firm versus interruptible on the natural gas, because everything I'm hearing from the testimony and everything was that interruptible natural gas is last on the list there, and so it will get clipped in terms of, and so discussions around natural gas contracts, exports into Mexico, and LNG contracts and other things like that having a higher priority over the interruptible contracts and power plants. So just further discussion around that.
Okay, thanks, Kevin. Okay, do we have any other, looks like we have nobody else in the queue. I'm sorry, Dan Bailey, go ahead.
Yeah, I think around the interruptible gas contracts, there needs to be some conversation around, facilities that have a single pipeline that don't have the ability to negotiate anything other than an interruptible contract. In other words, you can't get a firm contract. I think that needs to be identified, needs to be discussed.
Absolutely. I think that's definitely on the table. Okay. Thanks, Dan. Looks like the current queue is empty. If there's no other questions for Chase, definitely appreciate that, Chase, and appreciate the efforts that y'all put forth in putting this list together. Let's go ahead and move to the WMS update then. Rashmi, if you don't mind, the floor is all yours.
Okay. Thank you. So I would like to start off with saying thanks to you, Cliff, and Eric for support and guidance. I agree with Jim and Chase on that one. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Rashmi Sunendran. So, Cliff, we had a good WMS meeting. The WMS members put in a lot of effort to create an initial list before the meeting. And Ivan and I are very thankful for all the WMS members for putting this extra effort under such short notice when they were already so overloaded with it. The list is quite extensive. So most of it fell under the scope of WMS. There are some items, as Chase said, which span multiple groups, but there are definitely some which were outside the scope of WMS or required policy directions at higher level. So what we have done is in the Word document, we have marked those items which fall outside of WMS scope and at higher level separately at the bottom of the document so that TAC can have an idea of all the concerns that were raised for full transparency. Getting the initial list helped us dedicate a good portion of the time in the WMS meeting to get clarity from ERCOT on some of the recent market notices on settlements and credit related to this event. And those were having very immediate impact on the market participants and hence were very appreciated by the WMS members. And that discussion helped us identify some of the items that we wanted to bring to TAC's immediate attention, which TAC may or may not take as action at this point and which may need direction from board or outside, but we wanted to bring it to TAC's attention so that TAC can take action as appropriate. And since there are many items which might benefit from the discussions happening at PUCT and legislative and the ongoing evaluation of the event, we split the whole list into 3 categories. As I said earlier, one is the list that requires immediate attention. The second is a list of items that require review of the existing processes. And third is the list of requests for performance review and evaluating whether the current rules worked or not. Can you go to the next slide? So this is a list that we wanted TAC to give a heads up on. The settlement and the credit discussion was very extensive at WMS. It evolved mainly around understanding the different invoices that market participants got and how the shortfall and potential default uplift impacted each entities or will impact each entities and the market overall. And the discussion was mainly about how do we balance, how do we get a fine balance of recovering the shortfall fast and equitably, but at the same time minimize the potential for further default. So with relation to that, there are 3 items that I think ERCOT is open to feedback on those. The first one is the current cap on default uplift invoice. There's a 2.5 million system-wide cap on default uplift invoice per 30 days right now. And so if we have the 1.6 or the 2.4 billion default uplift, then using this cap, it might take 50 to 80 years to recover it. So Mark Rowan was very nice and be available during the WMS meeting, and ERCOT had indicated that they welcome feedback on this and expect some sort of discussion somewhere. The second item is the process for replenishing the card. Right now, 800 million is pulled from the card, and there was discussion about should it be replenished first? If it gets replenished first, what is the impact on potential default uplift? What is the impact on card distribution? So the ERCOT is open to feedback on that one. The third one is, should netting be done at counterparty level? This was raised by ERCOT, and it is in the 8th bullet item in Bill Magnus's letter. Currently, it is done at QEC level. So these 3 items TAC would take up or consider. The next 2 that I have listed are low-hanging fruit, which have high impact and which we might get direction from PUCT on. One, we got the PUCT order during the event on adding firm load shed to RDPA. And if that needs to be a continuous process, then the protocol needs to change to account for that. Next one, there's discussion on the dam ancillary service prices. And if we need to cap it or procure it based on a demand curve for the summer, then a protocol change needs to be done for that. And these could have impact for the summer. And so wanted to raise it to TAC's attention. Going to the next slide. So this one is set of requests on process review. The first is a CDR and SARA. This is part of item in Bill's list. Basically, a lot of questions on how how do we update the process to reflect the reliability risk, to capture the risk of range of ERCOT emergency events. Currently, it's based on averages and some sensitivities, how to capture different sensitivities, how to look at worst case scenarios, how to review, evaluate overlapping events, how to account for gas market coinciding and offsetting risk, and incorporate the fuel supply issue that Kevin raised, firm versus non-firm gas, and whether they have storage, how to incorporate all those. The next set was about change in assumptions needed for a lot of studies that we do, like RMR evaluation, MERM, EORM, load forecast. All of those studies, should we look at winter peak differently? Should we look at planned forced outages differently? How about resource dispatch scenarios, scenario analysis and trend analysis? How to incorporate extreme events like the 1989 December event? The next set is reserve requirement. Should there be different reserves in summer and winter, given the different type of load pattern and generation pattern, and the possibility of tripping is different? Should it be addressed by higher reserve requirement, or a new type of reserve requirement, or carrying more reserves by having EA trigger at a higher level? Or should it be created by creating pricing incentives during winter, which would help reduce seasonal, mothballed, or planned outages? Next is credit exposure calculation, and that's in, there's a bigger issue that is in Bill's set of questions, but there are a lot of detailed items in the credit exposure calculation, like looking at historic versus actual, looking at net value versus separate day ahead and real-time values. And I assume there's already debate at or discussion at market working group for an NPRR, which is evaluating the new credit processes, credit worthiness analysis. So already discussion is going on that. Next is real-time operation. How do we have more situational awareness about fuel availability, about the type of or level of price response with demand available, or even level of industrial loads available that could curtail, which the operators could give instructions to. Then how do we do cost recovery, compensation for firm fuel or exceptional fuel price process? How did it work? Should we be have another RUC process to RUC resources for getting firmer fuel, given the RUC timeline and the gas timeline, gas market timelines are different? Should there be changes in those processes? Next slide. Then there is a set of requests about performance evaluation, like ERS, that issue that Clayton raised, where there's self-curtailment, where there are critical assets that got curtailed because of ERS, because of being in ERS, and then would having more ERS have helped this event? Then for demand response, they were deployed beyond their obligation. Should there have been paid for doing that? Should AS imbalance for demand response be reevaluated? Again, the same question of critical assets. Then batteries, how did they provide FFR? Were they allowed to charge during EEA? Was having FFR useful during that early morning time? Was it effective? Should we have more or less based on use during the frequency event versus use during the whole longer time frame. The same about performance of SODG, DER. Could more visibility have helped? Could more of those resources have helped, or having those resources being able to participate in energy or ancillary service, would it have helped? Then DC tie, how did it perform? Should we update the planning assumptions based on their performance? Then real-time operation, congestion management philosophies during EEA3, again, the same question, like the GTCs, did it back down generation? Should it have been done during that time? Then ORDC, PRC convergence, how did it perform? How did it affect pricing? Then there were questions about metering, billing, and settlement errors and process and discretion used. That gives a very high-level overview of all the items in the list. Are there any questions? I see Clayton on the queue.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about the credit issues. We went into a number of things during the meeting. I believe if you go back to the slide on the $2.5 million per month, that specific requirement in the protocols was waived by commission order. I believe we were going to go into what that number needs to be revised to in future meetings. Is that correct?
Cliff,
At least
do
in
you think
regards
that
to this
needs to be
event.
that needs to be at the TAC or a WMS discussion? Yeah, I think it needs to be at somewhere.
It needs to be somewhere. $2.5 million a month gives you what that puts us out in the 50 to 60 year range before we get this recovered.
Yes.
Agreed. Yeah, I think so. I'm thinking as to whether that should be one that maybe TAC should hold on to, and I'm kind of leaning that direction. So that being said, maybe as we do the prioritization, I think there are going to be some issues that I think we probably do want to leave at TAC or whatever, and this may be one of them that we want to go ahead and do. But we'll take a stab at that, whenever we're doing the prioritization or whatever, and go from there.
Yeah, I think
okay,
all of those need to be at the TAC, the top three.
Another thing we discussed was the probability of secondary defaults once this is allocated, based on some of these entities that are going to receive the default being fairly undercapitalized for this level of default. And I had requested some data from ERCOT be provided to help us handicap that for our individual shops so that we can maybe understand what not only the primary allocation, but the secondary allocation may become in the future. And then my last comment is, go ahead.
ERCOT is aware of that request, and it is also in the WMS list.
Yeah, I guess I didn't see it in the list. Maybe it is in there. Now, the last thing, I think we discussed the potential of having a number today, the best estimate of where ERCOT believes the default risk is. Do we have that? Kanaan, I saw you at the Senate committee meeting yesterday quoting $1.6 billion. Is that still a good estimate, or is it modified?
Clayton, I tell you what, if you don't mind, can we hold off on that for just a little bit? I'd probably prefer to close out this issue of the identification of the items, and then I know Mark was going to speak a little bit at the end towards some of the updates as it pertains to the financial stuff. So we can just kind of address these issues here as it pertains to cataloging the issues. I think I'd prefer to stay on that route right now, and then we can talk a little bit about the credit implications and so forth here in a little bit.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Okay, looks like Bill's in the queue next.
Yeah, thanks, Cliff. Just appreciate the work here by TAC leadership and the leadership of the subcommittees, and agree with your comments, Cliff, about prioritizing those items that we were just reviewing and keeping them at TAC. I think we need to get resolution on some of this stuff in a little bit quicker fashion. So I second your suggestion there.
Okay, thanks, Bill. Okay, so it looks like maybe we have a clear queue at this time. Okay, any other questions for Reshmi on the WMS front? Okay, hearing none. Oh, I'm sorry. Looks like we've got Chris Hendricks. Go ahead.
Hi, Resmi. This is Chris Hendricks. I had a question about the netting. Can you clarify the netting by counterparty bullet point?
So currently the netting happens at QC level, and there were questions and debates about whether the invoice netting and the credit netting needs to be at a counterparty level.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thanks, Chris. We see nobody else in the queue. That being said, Reshmi and Ivan definitely appreciate all the effort y'all put forth in pulling this list together for the WMS items or whatever. At this point, I want to open it up and talk, open it up to the TAC members to see if there's anything else that maybe we haven't identified through either the updates from RMS, ROS, or WMS to see if there's anything else anybody wanted to add to the list that maybe we hadn't otherwise thought about. Okay, hearing none, then if you happen to think of any during, the time period between now and the next TAC meeting, please feel free to shoot those over to us. You can send them to Eric or I, or even to Stakeholder Services, and they should be able to get that information added to the list, and we'll go from there. So we want this to be a living document, so to speak, something that as we identify additional issues, we want to go ahead and add those to the list as we see fit. Again, I think we'll go ahead and get those added to a master list. We'll take a stab at trying to prioritize those and assign those to the working groups that we see fit up front, and then we'll bring that to TAC next month for your review and for you to go ahead and comment as to whether we think we have that prioritization and that assignment correct. That being said, stepping back to Clayton's questions, I know we had mentioned that we wanted to get a real quick update from Mark Ruan and ERCOT staff regarding some of the financial aspects and some of the credit issues that have maybe transpired over the course of the last couple of days. Again, there was a very good discussion at WMS on some of those issues, and being that that's such a dynamic part of the market right now and folks are extremely interested in it, I wanted to make sure that we had the opportunity to kind of get a bit of an update. Although it's not on our agenda, I figured folks would be certainly interested in hearing some more about that. So, Mark, are you available?
Yeah, yes, I am. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
The floor
Okay.
is yours.
Thank you. So first of all, at WMS, there was a good bit of discussion and requests from our participants to get more detailed reconciliations of the impact of the short pays and the other invoices flowing through the settlement system. We've had team on the ground working to put that together for all QSCs. It's been a very lengthy process, but we are making progress on it, and we'll reach out to you as we get those put together. I hope next week that should be available. As of right now, as of excluding any activity yesterday, we have a current short pay amount in total, an aggregate of 2.45 billion. That includes the 800 million that came from CRR funds. So the current balance as of this morning is 1,654,000,000 roughly. And within that, I do want to point out that we have collected all of the letters of credit and other collateral that was available to pull in to cover the short pays. In that short pay balance, there are 16 entities included. 3 of those are due to just timing issues in getting meter reads. We've discussed somewhat the issue where meters were incorrect during the freeze event. So we're doing a series of resettlements to pick that up. So some of the short pay amounts are associated with just strictly timing issues. Of the 16 entities included in there, 5 of those have since been acquired or terminated activity in ERCOT market. I want to point out that among the remaining names, we do expect there could be additional defaults of some of those entities. Obviously, I can't give you names and it's not sure, but we're working on that. I do want to point out that even though we're currently doing a series of reconciliations around IDR meter data, or not reconciliations, resettlements, we do expect to have sort of an ongoing basis and number of additional resettlements. I can't give you an exact number yet, but there are some other meter issue data that we're aware of. There are some changes that will arise from things like repossessed CRRs, potential other receipts from short paying entities, things like that. So because of that, just be aware that we expect to do a number of additional resettlements, but I can't give you an exact number. The one other thing I wanted to point out is that we're going to be issuing a market notice on Monday. And we did put out a market notice on Wednesday of this week that was providing the names of the short paying entities that we had hadn't previously been disclosed. And we got a lot of feedback because some of them actually since paid their short pay balances. Some cases payments were just late. It's not feeding into that grand total of the short pay balance that that I just gave you. So we're issuing a market notice on Monday. We just want to make it clear that for some of those entities, they ended up paying their short pay. There's just kind of a timing difference. And what we're also doing in the market notice is giving you what the current aggregate total of the short pay balance is and the composition of that by entity. So we're planning on issuing that market notice probably once a week, as long as we need to. So that way it'll be transparent to you what the aggregate balance is as we go through this kind of drawn out process of doing resettlements and hopefully some additional collections. So that will be available on Monday morning. I just want to make sure you were aware of that. Any questions on all this?
Yeah, I have one more. Does this include the Rayburn, any Rayburn potential short pay or related to their filing at the commission?
Okay, I'm not familiar with the commission filing from them, but so yeah, if they are currently a component of the aggregate outstanding short pay, then yes, we would be disclosing that.
Okay, I don't think I remembered seeing their name on the list, so maybe that's not coming yet. Maybe it'd be in the future.
Yeah, no, we'll show you going forward what all the components are of the short pay that is outstanding.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Chris Hendricks.
Hi, Mark. Chris Hendricks. 2 questions. One, on the daily short pay notices, is that showing all of the short pays for that day?
It's showing all of the short pays for a day. In cases where we know they are just timing differences, and there are a number of them, we are just identifying what the aggregate amount of timing differences are in the short pay.
Okay, so I guess to understand the way to read the aggregate, then if there was days that somebody short paid and then days that they are paying now in aggregate?
No, yeah, those market notices are just for the short pays that apply to 1 day, actually to the receipts that were due the evening before.
Okay. And then the second question regarding settlement invoices, there was some mention today at the commission meeting about delaying the dispute timeline. Can you speak a little bit about what the timeline would be to dispute some of those initial settlements that were issued for operating day 15 and 16?
I haven't been plugged in on that. Kanan, do you have an answer to that? I'm not sure what was discussed.
This is Kanan. At this point, those are still under discussion, so I could not answer that question for you, Chris.
Okay, Bill Barnes.
Thanks, Cliff. Mark, just to clarify, I know we talked about this at WMS, and I think you gave us a clear answer on it, so I just want to confirm, is when we're talking about the total amount of short pay and the $800 million from the CR revenue, I think it was clear that we should be considering that as part of the default, so that the $800 million will be, so to me, there isn't two numbers. There's only one number, and it's the $2.49 billion. That's the amount that we should be thinking about in terms of what amount will need to flow through the default uplift process. The CRR revenues will be a part of that. It'll be recovered through the default uplift process and then paid back to loads based on the normal card invoicing cycle, is my understanding.
Yeah, that's a good point. And the number that I'm reconciling to is the gross amount, the 2.4 billion before, that 800 million.
That's what we're doing as well. Just want to make sure we're clear on that. So
because, we're reporting as required by protocols, the short pays, and all we're doing is saying, here's what's currently outstanding. Even if the total amount of short pays is mitigated by use of CRR funds, those are actually the short pays that we did not receive technically over the course of this event.
That's right. We appreciate that detail, but it does create some confusion amongst our shop as to what actually needs to be repaid through the default uplift process, and there's only one number, and that's the 2.49. So, but yeah, we appreciate the detail on the market notices and definitely look forward to the aggregate notice coming out once a week starting on Monday morning. Thank you.
Sure thing.
Okay, thanks, Bill. Dan Bailey.
Yeah, so as a recent victim of timing-related short pay, one of the things that was we found very difficult was after you hit the list, obviously, a lot of folks, counterparts you do business with are curious about what your situation actually is. Mm-hmm. And we reached out to ERCOT, I think my credit people did, and even our CFO did, to see if there's any way that, and if ERCOT's even considered any way to say, hey, these guys, it was a timing related short pay and they are concurrent, because I spent most of the day talking to people about, actually what happened. And I was just wondering if ERCOT has given any thought to maybe saying, hey, this was timing related and these guys are up to, they're concurrent.
Yes, and that is why on the daily short pay notices, rather than, we're putting the total in to make sure the numbers are transparent and everyone can see that, but we're not identifying short pays that are due to timing differences. We've been putting a line that just says, I think it's like other due to timing differences, and just aggregating the total of those. So we're putting it in so people can see that there are some that are due to timing differences, but we're not naming names on those because, we know they'll catch up.
Well, there must have been a miscommunication then, because I know that I was told that ours was a timing related short pay, but we still show up on the list. At any rate, it's been taken.
Yeah, I apologize for that. It wasn't on the list that I had of timing issues.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks, Dan. Shannon. Ms. McClendon, can you, we can't hear you if you're trying to talk.
Can you hear me right now, Cliff?
Yeah.
Great. Okay, thank you so much, Cliff, for putting all this together and allowing us the opportunity to talk about all this, and especially your leadership and Eric's on the subcommittee stuff. Mark, I have a couple of questions for you. I really appreciate all the efforts y'all have done and your department has done in helping out a lot of folks that I'm aware of. I just had two questions, kind of follow up, one on Chris Hendricks on the dispute timeline, and I'm not sure if Kanan jumped in on that or not, but since the February 14th operating day, any disputes for that would be due today under the current protocols. Would we need to go ahead and file for those today to hold it as a placeholder? Or are we getting a thumbs up from the PUC and or y'all that we can hold off on filing those at least for another couple of days or so?
Yeah. And again, I apologize for not being plugged in that discussion. We, at this point, the current protocols hold. I thought there was a longer window than 10 days, but I would have to look at the language. I can have Ted Hiley reach out to you to give you some clarification on exactly how that timeline works.
That would be fabulous. You are
sure.
You guys, I don't know how you're doing it all right now, but thank you. And then my other question goes to the shortlist notices that are coming out daily that a few others have talked about, including Dan. And this may just be as obvious as it can be, and I understand that you're going to do it in the aggregate here shortly, but there are names that are being placed, and I think I may be being naive here, Mark, but like I don't see Brazos's name or Denton's name. Is that because they are paying currently, or like what is the status for that? For those of us that know that they've gone into bankruptcy or they've filed a TRO against ERCOT, is it just for the amounts in dispute and they are continuing to pay, so they're not on that list?
On the daily notices, we again are just reporting short pays on a single day. During, I think, last Friday and Monday, we did not provide those names for a number of reasons. And that's why, I'm saying on Monday, we're doing a market notice that will have the cumulative aggregate outstanding amount of short pays and which entities make that up. So if you didn't see names that have short paid before, when on the 2 days that those weren't published, then we would, we'll make them available on Monday. All that said, I can't go into detail on specific counterparty data other than a short pay amount, and that it'll all be provided on that notice on Monday morning.
Yeah, and thank you, Mark. I appreciate that. Is that you can't provide, I understand why you can't provide necessarily amounts associated with names from a confidential aspect, is what I'm guessing.
On short pays, we do. We are required to, and so we will. And again, we're doing kind of a catch-up one to reconcile up to the total short pay.
Okay, so not to put words in your mouth, if we're not seeing the name, it means y'all are okay with them, or I shouldn't say y'all are okay. It means that they're not short pay. Short pay.
Again, so there were 2 days, I think, when we didn't publish the names. And, basically there was too many questions at that point trying, to nail down what the short pay was. And there were, we weren't sure because of all the other activity that was going on around netting of exposures and things like that. So that was a choice intentionally. So there are entities that have short paid that so far may not have been named. but we are going to be providing that information to you. So you will have total visibility. And again, look for that first thing Monday morning.
Thank you so much, and really thank you all so much for all the work that you're doing, and particularly with working with the parties and the different market participants. At least from the perspective that I've seen, it's been outstanding. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Shannon. Seth. Seth, we can't hear you if you're trying to talk.
No, I didn't have anything to add.
Oh, okay. Sounds great then.
Thank you.
Okay, no problem. Kanan?
I wanted to get back to the dispute question that Shannon asked. I don't think we answered that. And we're trying to work through that issue. I know there are timing issues and some folks may need additional time. My advice would be, if you think you have a dispute, go ahead and get it filed. If you think it's, your opportunity is going to expire, and we'll try and work with folks who weren't able to get things in. But I mean, I think if you can, I wouldn't wait for an extension or count on an extension. I would hate for that opportunity to pass people by in terms of their rights.
Thank you, Kanan. That makes sense. That's what I was thinking you might say.
Thank you, Kanan. Okay, Jose.
Hey, I just wanted to make a comment about Denton was being mentioned about being on the list. Denton Municipal Electric is fully paid. There are no issues other than the ones the whole market is aware of. And those are being remedied through the courts. But Denton Municipal Electric is fully paid. And I just would like for folks to refrain from dropping names if they are not on the list. Thank you.
Thank you, Jose. I appreciate that. Seth Cochran.
Thank you, Cliff. I actually do have something to say now. Hey, Kanan or whoever could answer this. Since short pays are not an explicit line item on invoices, what dispute timeline do they actually follow? So in other words, we all know that there's a 10-day dispute timeline on invoices. Do short pays follow that same timeline?
Yes, because
the reason I ask is because it's okay.
Yeah, it would be the same dispute timeline as an invoice.
Okay, thank you.
If I could add one other point, not exactly related to that, but there's also a request at WMS that, and I think Clayton mentioned earlier, that we provide the breakdown by segment for the MMRs, the default allocation ratio. So we're working on that. I actually requested that get run. It hadn't been run in a while, so they're putting that script out together. But we will have that available.
Thank you. Kanan, I was going to jump over you, Lori, if you don't mind, because I suspect Kanan has something to say relating to the dispute timeline.
Thank you, Cliff.
Oh, Cliff, that's pretty impressive. I do. I just followed up with folks, and we are going to make some extension on the dispute timeline happen, and we will put out a market notice on that.
Great. Thanks, Kanan. That would be really helpful, if you don't mind. Okay, I'm sorry, Lori. Let's go back to you. Lori Simpson.
Thank you. This is Lori Simpson from Exelon. Mark, when do you expect to announce how much LCs were collected, how much collateral was collected to go against that $2.45 billion?
No, we typically don't disclose the amount of collateral we've collected against defaults in the market. There's no no protocol requirement for disclosing that. You know, I can't tell you we have collected all that were available.
So then how would we know, so if you've collected that, I guess you can start paying out some of the short pays, right?
Yes, and some of that was done either yesterday or Wednesday, I think maybe yesterday. Some of that was reimbursed back to short paid entities, and anything else that does become available will be returned.
Okay, how would you suggest we can do an estimate of how much, or we would expect to be changed by the LC collection if it's not being announced how much was collected?
Well, the amount that, you know, we reimburse is based on the total we have available. You know, if it is cash, if it is letters of credit, guarantees, you know, whatever. So, you know, it should show up in your invoices for the amount that you're getting reimbursed.
Okay, so one thing that might help, would you be able to put what that shortfall percentage originally was and then what it's changed to, just so we can tie that out?
Okay, the shortfall percentage, okay, of the allocation relative to the total.
Yeah, by invoice date.
Okay, that is, yeah, and that is part of the reconciliation process I mentioned up front they're working on. And I know that's one specific thing they're having difficulties with because of the complexity of this calculation. But yeah, to the extent we can do that, we will. But again, I don't have that available right now. I know that settlements is still working through that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Lori. Mark Bruce.
Thank you. Cliff, let me check my audio. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Sure can, Mark.
Great. I think this is a question for Kanan. And I couldn't quite decide whether to ask it or not, because maybe your market notice on Monday will contain this guidance, or perhaps it's fitting for me to just ask you here to try to put this guidance into that market notice. But there's been some confusing discussion between the PUC open meeting earlier today and the discussion here in this meeting about the dispute process under Section 9, the 10-day trigger and all that, versus the longer and sort of more flexible ADR process under Section 20. And in my own reading, it had seemed pretty clear to me. Well, I guess it depends on the nature of the dispute, but at least for the persons for whom I'm investigating these issues, it seemed like their dispute properly fell under ADR, that it did not properly fall under the more strictly technical disputable items that are accepted in Section 9. And so to the extent that people are wondering whether it's this 10-day or 6-month deadline to file, and you guys might get whomped with a lot of filings if you're telling everybody, go plant your flag in the ground now so that you don't lose your rights. I just wonder if you guys could provide some guidance as to kind of what is a Section 9 dispute versus an ADR dispute, so that market participants can sort of get more comfortable about, you know, their schedules going forward. Thank you.
May I answer that, or would you like me to wait?
No, go ahead, Kanan. You can answer.
So, Mark, I think we would like to probably give some more guidance. My initial thought is that, I mean, my past experience is that ADRs usually come from a dispute. I'll go back and do some more research on that to inform everybody about how we see that.
Mark, does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think that's helpful for now. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Mark.
Probably not that helpful, but that's the best I could do, Mark. I apologize.
We're all trying, Kanan. Keep your chin up.
All right, Clayton.
Yeah, Mark, on the MMARS data that's going out next week, is that revised with the defaulted entities being taken out of the denominator?
I didn't commit to next week. I'm hoping for next week.
Okay. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, I see what you're saying, because it is based on the activity in last month, or so in this case it would actually be, we would use both January and February. That calculation is automated, so it doesn't. Yeah, I'd have to look at it, because it doesn't have a current adjustment in there to take them out. So we'll take a look at that as we're trying to recreate that job.
Okay, and I would presume that Brazos and Rayburn would be considered still included in those allocations. Is that correct?
At this point, everyone who is active in the market in the respective month would be.
Is that a yes?
Yeah, but not specifically then. In general, anyone who was active in the market would be included in the percentage calculation, in the allocation percentages.
Right. So any of the entities that actually came in and paid their short paid back, and then also Rayburn and Brazos, because they're being allowed to continue business as usual. That's correct. Is that a correct statement?
That they're continuing business as usual?
Well, that they are continuing on as a participant in the marketplace and will be allocated, at least in some regard, some form of their own short pay.
I couldn't speak to it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'm not sure.
If you're aware that, for an entity in bankruptcy, again, we haven't received final guidance yet from the courts on this.
I see what you're saying. The judge may decide that they don't have to pay the uplift either. That's a potential.
Yeah, and I simply do not know. They are in bankruptcy. We are working through the bankruptcy process for Brazos, but I haven't received additional clear direction on that. So I cannot give you better answers at this point.
No, that's certainly fair. I had not thought of that aspect of it. Thank you.
Okay, looks like Dan Bailey's next.
Yeah, I'm going to go off topic a little bit, and I apologize if this has already been mentioned, but I didn't hear it. Has there been any, does ERCOT have any expectation of when they will resettle the failure to perform AS service stuff, when we could expect to see those resettlements?
We haven't scheduled it yet. I don't even, yeah, we're just in the process of trying to identify what the numbers would be. So I am trying to avoid doing multiple resettlements on one evening over one settlements run. So, we have the current IDR resettlements that are being spaced out over 5 business days. And then I'm aware of 1 or 2 others that will come after that. So I don't have a date yet for that. Again, I do expect that we will be doing resettlements for some period of time. It's given the complexity and the number of issues here, and some things that we haven't fully worked out. We expect there will be a period of fairly frequent resettlement, but I don't have a defined calendar at this point.
Mark, let me add a little bit to that. I just want to clarify, Dan. This is the in reference to the commission order that was issued on, I believe, Wednesday. Is that correct? Do I have the context of your question right?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
So that is actually a pretty complex calculation, and I'm not sure we're going to have the price adjustment until later next week. Then that would, once we have that, then that would trigger the resettlement.
Yeah, my expectation is you'll put out a market notice when that resettlement occurs, like you always do, right?
Your expectation is correct.
All right, thank you.
Okay, Chase Smith.
Thanks. Mark, I've got a question about, and this is Chase Smith of Southern Power. I have a question about documentation of these partial payments that are coming as ERCOT is able to collect some of the short payments due to it. My understanding is that the current settlement process, you have the statement that comes out that includes initial true up final, all the different operating days as appropriate. But that shows that the full amount owed to the QZ. And my understanding of what's happened here, as far as when there is this short payment, is basically just ERCOT doesn't pay the full amount on the original invoice. So my question is there, I'm not aware of any sort of like miscellaneous invoice or anything like that that shows, hey, market participant, we are now going to pay you, X amount of dollars that is associated with a shortfall on a particular invoice. And so my question is, is that right that there isn't any sort of invoice specifically for that? And my understanding is that maybe it flows through some of the credit reports, I guess depending on how that is set up. But I'm just trying to understand the ability for market participants to track and understand and see documentation as far as ERCOT's able to collect more of these short payments, and then how it's going to be funded out to the short paid entities over time. Thank you.
Mark, I don't know if you're speaking, but if you are, you're muted.
I'm sorry, you're right, I was muted. Yeah, we are happy to do market notices for any collections that are changing the amounts to explain the source and how that reimbursement would work back through the invoice process. So yeah, going forward, we will definitely do market notices for those.
I think market notices clearly is helpful to explain, to be transparent and explain the process. But I guess what I'm asking is there something specific to how any one particular market participant can understand, actually see numbers as far as receiving those short, and maybe what you're talking about is describing that process in that market notice, and then, we'll actually do it at some point in the future. But
yeah, and we are also, again, the settlements team is working on putting together sort of detailed reconciliations to help individual QSCs walk through that process and understand all the moving pieces. We don't have them available yet, but we understand you need that transparency, so they are working on getting that.
Great, thank you, Mark. That's
Sure.
That will be very helpful.
Yeah, they're really heads down on it. It's just, you can imagine it's very complex. So that's where it stands right now, though.
Thank you.
Sure.
All right, thank you, Chase. Emily.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
This is Emily Jolly at LCRA. Mark, I want to thank you again for making yourself available to answer our questions, both at WMS and again today. I do want to make sure I'm understanding something, and I don't want to belabor the point, but in response to Clayton's questions related to the Brazos bankruptcy, it sounded like there was sort of a blanket answer of it's unclear really what the bankruptcy court will require. At WMS, however, I think you were going to pains to distinguish between pre-petition and post-petition claims.
That would be the
So
case in any bankruptcy.
I'm trying to reconcile, though, what ERCOT's position is with respect to this specific set of invoices and whether you're expecting the pre-petition to be recovered, or can you walk through that with a little more detail?
You mean the claims? I'm sorry, I was getting pinged. The pre-petition claims, if that will be honored by the bankruptcy court. To be honest with you, again, I am giving you full disclosure here. I don't know. I don't really have any expectation for how the pre-petition estate will be disposed of. And we've had other bankruptcies, that are pre-packaged and that kind of thing is known in advance. This, we didn't have advance notice. Nobody did. Brazos will tell you that. So a lot more is up in the air than probably has been, the case in other instances. We are working to comply with whatever would be necessary, like segregating pre and post-petition entities and funds. But whether the bankruptcy estate will be required to reimburse some of that, I simply couldn't say. That is, that will play out in fullness of time via the bankruptcy process.
All right, thank you for addressing that.
Yeah, I'm sorry I don't have a better answer, but really that is precisely where we stand right now.
This is Kenan. I'm not sure this meeting is intended to discuss the bankruptcy of any one particular entity. And I think there's a lot of issues at the court that neither Mark nor I are in a position to even answer. So I'm not sure of the value of these questions to us, since that is not in our purview.
I appreciate that, Kenan, and I certainly didn't intend to ask questions about that. We were really focused on getting those answers and responses from Mark at WMS on Wednesday. It's just simply since these issues have been brought up today, and it seems like there's maybe some, perhaps some changes in how ERCOT might be communicating about that. It did raise the question, and so I certainly apologize for being out of scope, but we are trying to react to this, based on what we're hearing from ERCOT today.
Now, I understand your need. I'm just also trying to make sure you all understand that that's not something where we can exert any expertise over at this point in time.
Thank you, Emily. And let's see, looks like we'll go to Ian next, and then I'd like to start wrapping up the conversation, here shortly or whatever, if we can. And I know we were just looking for an update from Mark and Kenan, so, to the extent we need meetings in the future to kind of get some updates from time to time, I think we can certainly work with ERCOT to establish those. But I think we'd probably want to start closing up this conversation here sooner rather than later. So go ahead, Ian.
Thank you, Cliff. Mark, my question is on the $800 million of card money that was used at the WMS meeting. You said that ERCOT was still determining how to use those recovered collateral funds to pay back short pays or pay back card funds. It sounds like ERCOT has decided just to pay back short pays and not replenish those card funds.
Yeah, no, we are not using collateral at this point. Per protocols is just applied to short pays. So I apologize, I miscommunicated, but we're not looking at using recovered collateral against the $800 million at this point. We're following the rules and just refunding it back to entities that were short paid.
Okay, so there's currently no way to pay back that card money.
Well, there are ways, but I don't know what the way will be at this point.
Okay, that's a gigantic change. Thank you.
All right, we'll go to Bill, and then I think we'll go ahead and probably terminate the conversation on this specific piece. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, thanks, Cliff. I just wanted to just be really clear on the CR auction revenue. And Mark, feel free to jump in, but because it's been a point of confusion for us as well. Is on the 26th, given the shortfall, ERCOT could have made a much bigger short payment to the market. Instead, they borrowed $800 million from available CR auction revenue, which is not due to be paid out for an extended period of time in the future, to lessen the shortfall and help out the cash flow situation, which we agree and we support ERCOT's decision on that. That $800 million would have been just plain old default, right? And so that would have increased that short pay in the middle of the worst part of the crisis. The auction revenue that they've held back, which I believe is around $200 million, will be used to pay down or make payments on the card invoices that are due over the next few months. So my understanding is loads are not going to see any reduction on their card invoices as a result of this. But that default amount will need to be recovered. So that's why I was trying to make the point earlier, is this is, and he had similar confusion, is the $800 million is default. It was part of the default. ERCOT helped out the liquidity situation by borrowing it. It will be part of the default allocation process, will be recovered, and then loads, say this is auction revenue for years in the future, will get their card invoices paid in full once it's recovered through the default uplift. I hope that helps. It is a confusing topic, but Ian, I think what I was wondering at WMS was whether ERCOT was going to prioritize on recovering funds to paying the $800 million first before refunding to other short paid entities. But that wouldn't have any effect. That wouldn't change the outcome, because then they would just be lowering the recovery and the payments to short paid entities. So at the end of the game, or at the end of the day, it's a zero-sum game. And Mark, if I screwed that up, I apologize.
No. Thank you, Bill. And I think Kanan wanted to add something.
I think, on this issue, let's put it on the issue list, and we would like folks' feedback on it, and we can provide more detail in the appropriate forum. But I think on that one, there are multiple ways that revenues go into card. There are multiple ways that things could be dealt with going forward, and we're happy to take input on that.
And sorry, Kanan, I think the confusion that we had is that there was a thought that loads would be getting short paid through their invoices and then would stop receiving the card revenue that they were expecting. And that is not the case, from my understanding.
That we don't believe that will happen.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks a bunch, Bill. Okay. Well, it looks like we have worked through all of our agenda items. Again, we will start taking that list from each of the different subcommittees, the issues that were raised today, the ERCOT issues that were raised, and we'll create one master list and start taking a cut at, parceling those out and categorizing them. And then at the next TAC meeting, we can pick that up and we can see if, our first cut at that is, what the will of the group is, and we can rearrange and reprioritize as we deem necessary at that meeting. That being said, that's all that we have on the agenda today. So barring any other items today, I think we will go ahead and adjourn. Thank you all.
Thank you.